But I just want to have a chat with this gentleman, why he did what he did. Because you had the courage, audacity, whatever you call it, to put a wind turbine on the top of a tricycle and a solar panel. And how many kilometers are you doing every day with that?
3.2 kilometers.
3.2 every day?
Yes, sir.
And it works?
Yes, sir.
So if the whole world shut down, you'll still be riding a trike.
Yes, sir.
Wow, that's a big hand for you. Wow. So how much did the tricycle cost?
It costs around 126 pesos.
126,000, that's about a little bit more than $2,000. And it's cheaper?
If you compute the return of investment, so it's much cheaper.
And you don't go to gasoline stations.
No, sir, we don't have.
You can sneak into neighbors because you don't make any noise.
Yes, sir.
This gentleman is dangerous.
So what made you start doing this project?
It was from when I was young. We don't have any money to buy our own tricycle. My father is a fisherman, and during stormy seasons, he barely made enough money to feed us. So he always told me that he wanted to buy a tricycle. As you know, tricycle is the second most popular vehicle in the Philippines next to jeepneys. In Iba, Zambales, and in Zambales, almost everyone uses their own tricycle to earn money. So that's why I thought to myself, I should buy one, or rather I should make one. But then, during the time, we don't have enough money to buy our one tricycle. And even though if we can buy one, our problem will be gasoline. So, during the time when I was in college, the e-bikes are becoming a trend. But then another problem occurred. We barely have enough money to pay our electric bills, so I thought to myself, maybe I should try making one or buying an electric vehicle which can be used without charging it on outlets. And on my fourth year, while we were brainstorming, I accidentally made a design which can help sustain the electricity from the electric vehicles. And that's the set or self-sustaining electric vehicle.
So you see, our colleague from Meralco is already afraid that you are bypassing his grid. I don't think there's anyone left from the oil company. So you are self-sufficient. So I think we will like to continue this discussion. There is a colleague, gentleman there who is making an electric boat. I'm sure can help you with some technologies. And Jeruz is also putting together an electric boat. Jeruz, the gentleman behind you, is making electric boat. No, Jeruz behind you. Yes, you should also. No, the gentleman behind you is making yes, you two should meet. Okay, so thank you very much. So we will continue this discussion. I'll see what we can do, but you have really inspired me personally. I'm sure you inspired many. We don't have to wait for the government. We don't have to wait for the utilities. Let's just do it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so we will start our next panel discussion. So we start with Merida. I think let's all take, here we have BYD, Meralco, Rebecca. Am I missing someone else? And Greg. How did we miss Greg? Okay, you can see. You're giving all the gender balance. All our panel have here. Before we go to the panelists, what I thought I will have a few slides to set the scene. Raymond, can we have? First, I want to start with that how does the future look like? First slide is this, we'll go back, that we have been discussing, one more, back. keep going back. Keep. This morning discussion was a lot about the grid, if it is already coal, or why we should do it, but then we use numbers saying this, it doesn't matter what it is. But overall, the trend, global trend is grid is getting greener. We don't have to wait. Of course, we can go off grid as well, but this is one thing, very important. Second thing is global EV outlook. IEA last year said 150. This year they said, oh, we have another forecast, maybe 250. And if you look all the different forecasts, especially on the left-hand side, IEA's forecast is the star, and look how they have revised all their forecasts. And then bottom right-hand side, that's a video slide someone used the other day, that Bill Gates even thought 640K will be enough for computers. So they will be always wrong. But today the electric vehicle, all the OEM, if you stack them up, their commitment is close to 100 million units, but the forecasts are still 250. But I think we will go way, way beyond that. So, because they cannot be trusted. Okay, now, other thing is the cost of lithium-ion batteries. When I started this project, e-trike project in the Philippines in 2011, I don't know, I was really, must have been crazy because that was pre-Tesla, and this organization was convinced enough to put $500 billion on the table. So some of those tricycles actually happened, but issue is, at that time, I assumed that the battery price would be $380. The price was $1,100. But today, where did that go? The forecast is still that by 2040, battery price will be close to $50. Now, this is a very important number because future, charger, all the things that you talk about, this is how the battery prices have fallen to date. 2011, it was 1160. Today is 176. And if you look at it, you have the breakdown here, the battery pack and others. This is just recently published. Now you say, so what? The reason it is important, if the battery price goes down one notch further, the tricycle that we piloted into Mandaluyong had a 3 kilowatt-hour battery. We paid, I think, more than $2,000 at that time for the first units. If it's $50, the battery will be $150. Nissan Leaf, which has a 40 kilowatt-hour battery, 30 kilowatt-hour battery, I think, that will become $1,500 for a battery. I mean, that changes everything. So this is something, a very important number, because if you look at the forecast going down, so far it's worked out, 176. There are people who say, no, this will never happen. I suppose they are not here. It's very important, the impact of that will have, the impact of tiny cameras had. So let's not ignore. Because the disruption is like, this is a house in Sydney, typical house, $750,000. To put a house, whole house, on an average, all of us in this room maybe consume about 20 kilowatt hour a day. Maybe maximum. If you have a 150 kilowatt hour battery, that's a tons of energy for the entire week. And if you can put that system for $7,500, disruptions ahead, nothing stacks up. All these assumptions, theories that we talked about, out of the door. If I can put, and this is a very tiny percent of my house, 1%, I'll build all battery arm off the grid. So you might say this is utopia. Just I want to show one 3-minute video of a friend who's already doing it. and then we go into the discussion. Because I want you to lift off, think about 2040, then when these two teenagers will be running the bank, they will be 35 years old, I'll be happily retired. This is a video taken July 27th, so this is not today.
We have a three-phase house. We put one of the batteries on two of the phases. Two of the phases have a battery, and then the third phase doesn't have a battery. We're using the third phase to basically charge the cars up at night at a high rate. So that's and sometimes some air conditioning on peak. So the function of the storage on the house is not just to come on during the peak period, which is between 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. and offset that with basically energy we've either picked up from off-peak or the solar that we've absorbed. It would probably be over 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. We have 2,600 kilowatt hours in the cars per year, and that's about 20% of the total. Our highest single usage is actually home heating in the winter. It's much larger than the cars. And so if you have to think about where you might attack the problem, it really probably will yield to energy efficiency measures in the home. This doesn't have actually that much. It's an older home and it's a bit difficult to change in certain respects. So this is the inverter. The battery is just sort of a simple battery at this stage, and this controls the battery output or input according to certain instructions. It's going to be upgraded to deal with outages. So when the power goes off, this unit will switch in the battery and power the house. And so we'll have to have two of those, obviously, the two units.
We are trying to engage some countries that Asian Development Bank works in, saying solar on a household. It's not a micro issue only.
No.
It has a huge system level issues, energy security countries.
It does two things. It isn't just supplying the grid during times of difficulty. It's actually decreasing the cost of the grid, because what it does is take power that's currently used during the peak period, which means stronger connections, wires going to the houses and so forth, and also reduces the amount of generation at peak.
But you are miles ahead. You already have 65%.
Yes, yeah, and that's an incredible. That's the transport sector and basically the domestic sector.
Yes.
We're talking about right now. So that's very, very serious change in planning for the grid, for example, or planning for oil usage, or all of those things.
So you stop going to gasoline stations completely?
Yes, we don't go there. We sometimes go there to pump up our tires.
And which is free.
Yes, that was just free.
And that was 2 years ago. This was done 3 years ago. So this is not future, this is actually past. So with that view, maybe we can start with, Becca, you want to give your reactions, how that will impact, because you also introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rebecca Plaza. I am the Managing Director of Plaza & Partners. I am the wild card in this entire conference. Basically, I am an architect and an urban designer, and we work really mostly on buildings. But recently, we've also been advising governments on how to move, how to transition toward being smart cities. With that said, looking at well, total wild card. The future of mobility really will start to transition and will start to be impacted as the cloud and the cars start to have more common ground. And so therefore, that's what we're doing here today. We're looking at smart, sustainable, and shared transport solutions to be able to move towards life in the 21st century. Ultimately, we do all of this really to improve life, right? And me as an architect and as a planner, oftentimes I try to design the ideal city for me would be a city without cars. But, sorry, am I offending most of you? But that is because, like what was mentioned earlier, we would be able to free up valuable landscape in the valuable land in valuable locations for other utilities, such as car parks and whatever have you. However, it must be taken into consideration that, as mentioned earlier by somebody in the panel before us, is that the only reason you would shift, the only thing that would make you buy an electric vehicle at this moment is if you can ensure that you have charging stations nearby. Therefore, the entire industry and the built environment also needs to move toward creating the infrastructure that supports electric vehicles. However, it must also be noted that the construction industry and the built environment is probably one of the longest, has the longest timelines. We're talking about like, the construction of imagine just the construction of a condo. That takes planning of 6 to 10 years. And if we decide today we're going to build a condominium to ensure that all the units, all the residential units will be able to have charging stations for their vehicles, that will take time for fruition. And therefore, before we transition to that, we need to start looking at other solutions of which these other men will be happily share. And I can comment on that later on.
Thank you very much. Greg, you want to take because you also mentioned that you have systems to integrate.
Yep. Thanks, Sahel. I'm here because of Sahel. So if it turns out in a bad way, blame him, not me. We're manufacturing EV in Australia. Very stupidly, we're trying to, but we've got a lot of protection.
You can also get Greg's slide.
A lot of interest in Australia for our project. It's a project that's got commenced in 2014, and you can start the slideshow. Empty road, keep going. And that's our badge, and you can blame Sahel for that because last event I went to last year over in Europe, we had to come up with an identity. ACE stands for Australian Clean Energy. And I've got 9 grandchildren, and I want them to have a good future. And these 2 girls down the front that spoke this morning, they're going to be part of doing it here in the Philippines. Next one, please. These are our 3 models. The unique thing about these vehicles, the only steel in them is in the spring and suspension system. The energy to put them together, 1/3 of an equivalent vehicle, and they can be built very quickly. The actual technology, very similar to the Boeing Dreamliner. That was the team 10 weeks ago. The vehicle arrived in Australia, and 6 boxes, no manual. Engineering so clever they could put it together like a Lego, and 6 days build, and on the 7th day they drove it out. Its very first and only service, a wheel alignment. Now we don't think of this as a car, we think of it more as a business on wheels and a mobile phone on wheels, and you'll see some of the technology behind it shortly. The great thing about it, of course, and in Australia, $36 a 1,000 kilometres. You go to a petrol station, put $36 in, see how far you'll get. Can you run the video?
$36.
John Hewson badged it. He was nearly Prime Minister of Australia. That'll do. We'll go backwards. This is the actual manufacturing process. The advantage of this is, as you can see, and I call this the skeleton. There are 19 pieces to the skeleton, being reduced to 14. This skeleton lasts 15, 20 years. It's common to all our three models that you saw before. The great advantage of it is that if you get sick of the look of the design of your vehicle, you can get new skins for it. So in 5 years' time, you can have a different looking vehicle. So for me, I'm a marine biologist. For me, it's important because the more we cycle and recycle every part of the vehicle, or make it last longer, the better. The clever thing about this, the battery goes in underneath, and in future time, if the battery technology changes, it's very easy to adapt into the vehicle. This particular cargo, we're driving it around at the moment in Australia. I've done 300 kilometres in it so far, and it's cost me $7. So 850 kilo carrying capacity, 110 kilometre full speed. Its range, it's only got a 30 kilowatt hour battery, its range is 250. And the reason for that is, as Mr. Lovin said, or Professor Lovin said this morning, weight. And this vehicle total weight is only 1,000 kilo.
Wow. Now, should we, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll finish this. This is the interior of it. It's not. It's like it's as good as any car you'll get into. And really, what we're doing here, we've got this vehicle here for Asia. That's why I'm here now today, to talk to people in Asia who might be interested in helping build this vehicle in different regions. Cradle's a great solution. We want it as easy to buy as a mobile phone. In fact, that's the app that you'll have on your mobile phone or something similar, and it'll tell you everything about the vehicle. You'll open the car door of the vehicle. If you're an ADB employee and you've got heaps of vehicles out here to drive around, you just go out to the car park, it'll tell you which vehicle's available and where you go, and it'll manage everything from there. Our Business on Wheels platform, very, very clever. The vehicle, in a few years' time, will be intelligent enough that when you walk into the garage, it'll recognise you and say, how are you today, where would you like to go? The other great thing we're looking at the vehicle, and it's done by Nissan Leaf, is we have two-way charging, so that means that you're home, full energy security. Power grid goes out, you survive. If you want to if you've got a deal with your power company, you can sell energy back to the grid and earn money off your vehicle. And none of this would have been possible, for us anyway, without this bloke who pushed the boundaries totally. And last video.
Wonderful.
Now, we're fortunate enough that there are people in Australia that do believe in us, and
but so far they've been slow to take off in Australia. Electric cars may be the future, but so far they've been slow to take off in Australia, with just a handful of electric vehicles on the market. But a Queensland company is hoping to change minds and along the way spark a resurgence in our local automotive industry.
October 2017, Holden's last car rolls off the factory floor. It ended an era, inspired an anthem. The shutdown of Australian car manufacturing, or was it? Could this humble electric van deliver a motoring revolution? German designed, Chinese supplied, Australian built.
Just how Australian can we make this thing?
We made it more Australian than Holden.
The company is called ACE Electric Vehicles. It can run 250 kilometres on one charge, about $7 worth.
This is how easy you get into the engine bay, which has not an engine.
It's made of tough carbon fibre composite, and it's built like an IKEA flat pack.
it came in 6 boxes, and without any instructions at all. It was built over 6 days.
Electric cars and hybrids sell fast overseas. 50% of sales in Norway, 5% in the US, but here, 0.3%. Consumers aren't convinced.
McGarvey says it's just a mindset change. Instead of coming here at the end of every week, you just top up at home at the end of every day, just like recharging your mobile phone. But many Australians are struggling with the concept.
He says federal government support is needed, funding, charging stations, and maybe a facelift.
It's not an attractive car, but it's got a personality.
Chris Reason, 7 News.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's really impressive, very good.
Can I just react on that?
Yeah, sure.
It's great. I think it's wonderful.
Wow.
Oh, it's not my reaction. Okay, good. Thanks. Yeah, it's great. Excellent. This is wonderful. You know, this is one of the things I want to touch on. That's actually, you know, the charging. This is especially VPP and also the charging. So this is the electrical vehicle evolved from the transportation sector, but actually it's never ended there. It's much wider. Just like, you know, the mobile phone. Everybody has a mobile phone here. So who actually probably 10% of the mobile function is making a call. For the rest, actually, you can do much more. So that's actually the reason why we think this electrical vehicles and EVs, this industry development will actually transform the sector. It's not beyond, like, you know, Stephen Jobs actually, the iPhones when they're making. So this is how we see. And but one of the critical things, as Greg pointed in the video and also in the slide, is how actually connected to the other sectors. That's the key. If you make a link, connection, smart way and intelligent and also forward-looking, you don't get locked in because ultimately it's infrastructure development, right? Investment as well. So maybe with that, can I put my slides?
So you are going to establish an industry for like a mobile phone cover, so change your car, a spare sort of wristband for your Apple Watch, new skin for your car. That's good.
So that's the looking, you know, into the future. Actually, what's the charge actually is innovation outlook. So some of those technologies and also things we talk about is current, and also the some probably is take the time actually to roll out. But you know the points here we are trying to make here is you know where's going to be direction and trying to actually avoid from the policy, also from the entrepreneur and also from the other industry perspective, and trying to at least avoid being locked in as much as possible. And as we said, this is EVs. One, you charge EV, and from renewable perspective, actually, where we see the more actually the storage. So that's we see the sector coupling from the transportation and back to storage, which is very important because as so here there's a beginning to mention there's more and more greening of electricity is happening, and you know thanks largely to the renewables. And but when we talk about renewables, especially solar and wind, as we know, this is wind reaching some certain percent of shares, depends on the grid, and you need actually the grid stability to become an issue. And the batteries, and here the EVs is going to be provide an important promising solution. So it seems like right now you see we have, I think, forecasting the data. So here at the beginning, it is 150 to 250, and depending on which scenario this IEA run up and the run, as we have a little similar, by 2030, 160 million. So that means right now we have roughly around less than 6 million. So this is basically 50 times. So basically, if you're trying to imagine, this is old, and one electric vehicle currently all of a sudden 50 around users, and if I'm going to charge, if they're not coordinated, if they're not really smartly designed, and what kind of impact, it's not about electricity, it's not about the production, it's not about the hours you consume, that's very little. At the long term, if all the all the vehicles be electrified and using EVs, and still the consumption is very little. But the point is, once if they charge at the same time, nightmare for the operator. I think in Germany, you see the nightmare's time for a German operator is what time? It's when the soccer plays. Yeah, everybody is watching. So that's the biggest challenge for them. So that's the same actually. The problem could be problems for the if EVs is coming to the scale. And we this is from the number from our global energy transition and study towards 2050. So we estimate roughly around 1 billion and EVs by 2050. Because the reason why for that, because after 2030, once you reach actually the mass volume, and actually for the ICEs, this is internal combustion engine, it's not profitable anymore because the volume, the scales, it's been eaten up by the EVs. And that's the turning point we see. So there's after that, one could be dramatically actually pick up this EVs volume. So the charging is becoming more and more important, and currently we've identified some smart charging solutions here, and it depends on the regulatory and also policies and the schemes and in the countries how to use that. So I don't want to get into details. I just want to mention probably a couple, two. One is need to be bi-directional. So this is very important. For example, the China, as we know, is a leading country, and BYD, and also among other car EV manufacturing. But actually, when you look at the charging station here, there's different. I think roughly around 2005, 2006, at the time, China, and it started with EVs. And the first batch of the charging stations is just like a joke. When you look back right now, so more and more right now they're evolving the technology. So that's but they're also retrofitting. This is costly too. So this is where I'm trying to see we will develop actually like Southeast Asia and also other countries will develop the EVs and the wind charging station, and they're trying to think like long term rather than just short term. They can make a chart, and then basically you're going to run into the problem for sure. This is, if you skill up. And also the pricing as well. This is one of the effective, but that's also regulatory free reform needed. So that's we probably don't highlight those two. And actually, if you look at the other the right side on your also the right side, this is a chart, and this is how actually the smart charging help the flexibilities. That's the trend we can see because it's for the same reason. And here's this slide. I don't get to the same details, and want to highlight there's two innovations, and the one is with the regulations, and there's different ways the government can think about it, and when you design, it's not only for the transportation sector, but also you have to also think about the other how to enhance the business, actually facilitate business development. Once we worked with Thailand and the association of Auto Association, we discussed about this EVs. At the beginning, the president and also around the BMW, Mercedes, Nissan, Toyota, and all of those manufacturers. On top of this, no, we don't want the EV. This is happening last year. And this is we don't want to use because in Thailand they use the biofuels. It's very good, and we have farmers. We have this is the future for us. I said fine, it's the future for you, but it's going to happen for the future for the rest of Thailand in the world. So that is how actually, and about after we done the project together with our colleagues, sitting up back, and after this, this Thailand, they changed their mind, this association. They said, we need lead time. We want change, but government need to give us lead time. Because for the industry transform, it takes time. So that we need at least half year to 10 months. That's minimum time. That's for us to coordinate with the headquarters to make the sector transform. And this is the same. This is once you get that down, and this is a smart charging is another important factor. And these guidelines, I don't get into details. So any countries they would like to develop in the EV industry, and that's probably the checking point. I'm not sure there's all of them will be relevant to each of those countries, but at least this is something they probably need to. It's better you can go through and see which are relevant to their countries and think about those, around those points, how they design, the policy framework and regular framework, and it was suitable for their countries. I think with that, I'll just quick finish. So my point is here, I think a charging station, it might be a little more expensive at the beginning, you think, but actually long run, this doesn't make sense. Otherwise, for sure, this for EVs, it's going to run into the problem with the power sector. So we cannot just, I think, still cross sector sort of cooperation and harmonization is the key.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, let me try to be a bit controversial. I think it looks like everybody's sleeping. What we heard this morning from these two teenagers, they have no patience. They're not going to wait for you and I to write the right policies, Meralco to build the right network, somebody to build the right car, they'll wait. And we already saw the gentleman who's completely gone off grid with his tricycle doesn't want to wait for anyone. I also shown an example in Sydney, someone is aspiring to be 86% off grid. That's transportation, heating in winter and cooling in summer. So what hope do we have our top-down policies will not release these people, consumers at large, saying, sorry, we go. Is there any comments from audience? Are you going to wait for governments to make policies, banks to bring right enabling environment, large utilities? Any comments, questions? No? Are we all tired? Come on. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Actually, policies are normally far-reaching.